All right, to all the conversations now, we see 2025 has been a record-setting year for African tech, about $1.35 billion. That's raised in just 6 months. That's a 78% jump from last year, signaling growing global investor confidence. But we're going to dig down on what's really driving, this surge. And we've also seen a trend here in Africa, a sign of growing maturity there for African startups. They're no longer being acquired at this point. They're now the ones doing the acquiring. Let's look at some of the landmark deals so far. We see Money Point there, acquired Sumac in another market in Africa. Move, they acquired Covey. Limfi acquired Pillar. So it's not just about being acquired at this point with African startups. Well, let's unpack this now and what to expect going forward. We have Tomiwa Aladekomo, is a founder, Big Cabal Media, joining us via Zoom. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Good afternoon.
So, from your lens now, I know you've been tracking this ecosystem, for years. Does this feel like a turning point or another wave in a cycle?
It really does. I think, we do this conference, and this year our theme is building momentum. And that's how we think of where the ecosystem is at the moment. It's building momentum as a more mature technology ecosystem, one that's actually starting to return capital to investors, one where the operators are increasingly capable and confident in what it is that they're building, and one in which they're sort of really casting their eyes globally. When we did our conference last year at Moonshot, we said our theme was building for the world. And the idea was that the products that we're building, the companies we're building, are not just solving African problems for Africans, but are solving African problems for the world. So when we start to see these kind of moves, where Limfi is acquiring Pillar, where we're moving within the continent, we're moving into other markets globally, it says that we were on the money in terms of our thinking about how startups have to operate and how it is that they have to approach the world. And I think it's great that we have the kind of operators that have the confidence, they have the kind of backing and investments that they actually can go out there and acquire sort of like international startups to sort of grow their businesses. And it's definitely a new moment.
Right. So if you're a startup and you acquire another company, can we still call you a startup?
I think you're then a mature startup. So we have what we call early stage startups. And so they're just starting, they raise what we call seed rounds, and a seed round might be $1 million to $5 million. The companies that you're seeing now are in growth stage, when they do their acquisitions. So if they're still raising capital, they're raising $30 to $50 million. And so you might still call them startups, but they're growth stage startups. They've figured out product market fit. They're building something that the market has clearly said it wants. And if they're raising capital, it's because they are expanding their operations. They're going into new markets. They're going into new business lines. So something like Money Point, at this point is sort of building, they've acquired a banking license here, and then they've acquired this bank in East Africa. So they're telling you we're going to be a major African bank. And if we're raising capital, it is towards that level of expansion, that level of ambition. So still a startup, still a faster growing technology company, but one at a very, very different stage.
Right. I guess there are levels to this, startup thing at this point. But, these startup-led acquisitions, you've said they signal maturity at this point. But
Yes.
What does it say about, the founder mindset and investor patience?
I think it shows incredibly ambitious founders. And I always say this, that some of the founders you get from Africa are some of the best founders in the world. Their ability to operate in these markets, to make sense of sort of tough, difficult markets, Nigeria, Kenya, Africa generally can be quite challenging to operate in. So for you to say you've conquered Nigeria and I'm going to go and conquer East Africa, I'm going to go and conquer Latin America, I'm expanding into North America, is incredibly confident, incredibly bold. I think from an investor perspective, it means that they're confident that you have the operational capacity to do it. They're willing to back you as you grow into other markets. And investors want a big return. One of the challenges with Africa is that our markets are quite fragmented. And so it looks like there's a big African market, but really you're going to have to conquer Nigeria separately from Kenya, separately from Uganda, separately from South Africa frequently because you got to deal with the regulators in different ways. So sometimes when you're expanding, you're like, if I can go into the USA, that's a major market, that's one market, and that's a big opportunity. In Africa, you probably want to conquer the big four. So you can do Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, Egypt, or depending on your strategy, companies like Wave are doing Francophone Africa. Um, but I think it does speak to incredible confidence by both investors and founders and operators that they really are able to sort of deliver this growth. They really are able to sort of really win in different markets.
Right, and definitely with maturity, I guess, comes a lot of responsibility. Do you think these startups, have what it takes to overcome risks? When it comes to, I'm sure there are expansion risks. For you being a fintech, expanding to other, countries and continents at this point. Do you think they're able to weather any storm, that comes with the risk of expansion?
I mean, expansion is risky, it's dangerous, but I do have to say we are dealing with a much more capable ecosystem from the founder and operator side, from the investor side, from a regulator management side. A really important thing that's happened in our ecosystem is that we're no longer at the phase where everybody is experimenting from ground up. The operators, the founders of these companies, whether it's Lemvi, Moneypoint, Move, whichever one of it is, these are people who've worked in multiple startups before. They've worked in growth stage startups before. So startups that have gone from very, very small but grown very, very rapidly. It gives them a wealth of experience with managing regulators, with managing risk, with managing operations in multiple markets. And you can see it from the way they move. The level of capital that they have access to gives them access to um, advisors who understand these markets, who understand the risk. So you're not working with a local lawyer that only has dealt with one market. You're working with lawyers that understand regulation in the target market that you're trying to move into. And so I think that they are incredibly capable as operators and as companies. And yes, I mean, we see big global companies go down or really get damaged by risk. But I think that the operators that we have sort of building and running these companies are definitely ready to take on the world.
So what are you seeing, going forward for Africa's startup ecosystem? Do you see more startups acquiring, more businesses, or maybe the ones that are not unicorns and all of that, acquiring, at this point? What are you seeing?
I think it's really important that we're starting to see exits. So not necessarily in terms of IPOs, not a lot of IPOs yet, but we're seeing sort of secondary rounds where investors are sort of receiving capital back. I think that's important. I think we're going to see that continue to happen. I think that we are in building momentum stage. So we need more of our early stage startups to get into growth stage and sort of raise real capital. We need a lot more investment in the early stage startups. So very, very important that we start to see more local capital deployed towards technology. Our investors are still very, very aligned towards sort of like the traditional sectors, and that's everything from, energy and oil and gas to real estate. And we really need a lot more early stage investment because the next round of Flutterwaves and Moneypoints and Paystacks are coming. And now is the time to fund them. Now is the time to sort of get into, whether it's clean tech, whether it's edutech, whether it's health tech, fintech again, commerce, lots of interesting opportunities. So this is the time to get into them. And again, like on the Tech Cabal side, every year we have this conference, Moonshots, that happens in October. And we try to bring sort of the most interesting startups that are doing things and investors and the markets to understand one another and to meet one another. And so I think it's critical that we're paying attention to those startups who are attending events like that and sort of like, making sure that the most interesting startups coming up now, the most interesting technology ideas are getting the funding, are getting the capital that they need for us to build sort of that next wave of incredible startups that will go global.
All right, I guess at this point is African startups to the moon and maybe beyond. Thank you so much, Tomiwa.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today. Founder Big Cabal Media. Thank you for coming on today.
Take care.
And talking about the moon, we'll find out which asset classes or stocks are heading to the moon at this point. That's the moment. Willie Bong will bring us those details. Just stay with us.